Hi, questions. We're going to talk about questions. So why are questions so important? Well, as my grandfather used to say, the only thing you get without asking for it is disappointment. And to quote the Bible, ask and it shall be given. So it seems everybody agrees questions are pretty much at the centre of our lives. Now, the traditional way of understanding questions in sales training used to be open questions and closed questions. A closed question leads to a yes or no answer from the other person, and an open question is supposed to allow them to speak openly. Except that's not really what happens, is it? If someone wants to tell you something, then they will, even if you ask them a yes or no question. And likewise, if a person doesn't really want to share, then asking them why that is will still lead to no information being forthcoming. The only problem with closed questions is that they make sharing a little bit more inconvenient. But sometimes their very provocative nature, their attempt to limit your response, can actually be a good thing. Watch any police or courtroom drama if you want proof of that. Okay, so here are 10 reasons, 10 ways we actually ask questions, which is a more productive way to think about them. Number 1, getting information. The most obvious reason for a question is simply to find something out. When I started in sales, it was possible to ask as many information-seeking questions as you wanted. But as time has gone on, customers have become more and more time-constrained. And this means you have to do as much research as you can before you turn up in order to ask relevant questions. As long as you're asking questions that have a point, you're okay. But most customers will tell you quite swiftly if they think you're just using them as a primer course in their company. Number 2, focusing the conversation towards a point. Perhaps the most common use for questions is to get people to focus rather than to get information. Where are you going on holiday? This is a way of getting someone to think happy thoughts. It's very rare we actually care where they're going. We are just showing that we care by getting them to focus on something nice. And this leads to the next reason, pulling the conversation away from a point. When we do not want to give a certain piece of information away, we will often answer a question with another question in order to move that conversation away. So, when asked where you were on a particular night, you might reply, well, why do you want to know that? And I recall a teacher asking a friend of mine during my school days, why weren't you here at 9 o'clock then? To which he replied, why? What happened? Number 4, framing a conversation right from the start. This is also often used in education to state learning objectives and to define the purpose of projects. An example is, so, why are we all here today? Or, the question is, what do our customers really need to get from product X? Goals are very effectively stated as questions. We immediately start seeking answers because that's the way our brain is wired. Number 5, demonstrating your knowledge. The way in which you ask a question gives away how much you know about the subject. So, deliberately phrasing a question with inbuilt knowledge establishes you as a credible person immediately. Using industry standard jargon and customer specific language always helps, but getting it wrong also carries a risk, so be careful. Number 6, uncovering the logic behind a position. When someone states a belief or even a fact, we need to understand why they believe that thing or why they think that's a fact. Asking a question about a statement before we launch into a dispute about it is always a good idea. So the next time someone says, the moon is 100% made of cheese, ask them why they think that before you start quoting NASA's Moon Geological Survey. They might just be talking about a decoration on a cheesecake they just made. Number 7, progressing a narrative or story. We use questions such as, and then what happened? Or just a simple, really? Or, uh-huh? To get people to keep talking. This is vital in sales because the more a customer talks, the more they feel heard. And it also seems to be a law of sales meetings that the truth only ever comes out towards the end. A colleague of mine used to swear that the 3 most valuable words in sales were So, anything else? It always seems to uncover more value. Number 8. Showing empathy. Listening to someone involves showing empathy. And one of the key ways we can do this is through asking context-specific questions as they tell us their stories. There is a world of difference between asking a distressed customer how their problem is affecting their business and just telling them, oh, you're in a lot of trouble, and getting your order book out. When we ask these questions, we're not actually seeking information, we're communicating to the customer that we care. Number 9. Demonstrating shared experience. Asking a few good questions gives you the chance to chip in with a story that demonstrates that you've been in a similar situation to your customer before. This is useful to show expertise and also to show empathy. These questions might sound a bit odd to a casual observer because they will be very specific to the situation involved. For example, I received a phone call late one night. The person on the other end of the phone was panicking because a truck had not arrived to pick up their load as planned. I immediately asked him to check the pickup booking. I knew this customer, and I knew this was a mistake he'd made before. He hadn't checked his pickup booking, and the pickup wasn't actually for us. He was adamant that he had the correct time, and he wanted me to just send another truck over straight away. Eventually I got him to look at the booking, and he realised he had actually sent it to another company. Obviously I sent him a truck as soon as I could, and we got that business back permanently this time because I'd shown empathy and understanding of his situation. Finally, a really important point that demonstrates why a good question will always get you further than any argument, no matter how persuasive. Number 10. People do not sell things to other people, they help them to buy things from them. Questions are designed to get the customer to decide to buy themselves. If you try and persuade them to buy, then you immediately open yourself up to objections. Now we'll be dealing with certain types of objections in a further part of the course, so don't worry about that too much. But if the objections are just to do with the product features, then sometimes you can field them. But most times, objections are driven by what the customer believes about themselves. And so you wind up actually trying to change the customer, not sell them a product or service. Let me illustrate this for you. Say a customer doesn't want to sign up for a subscription deal for your product. Now that's normally nothing to do with the item itself. They may be quite happy to buy a one-off license for that product, or get a graduated usage agreement in place. The reason they are objecting is usually that they don't like unlimited commitments, and that will be directly related to their view on risk and how they see the world in general. So when you try to get them to buy a subscription, you'll actually be challenging their view of the world as a risky place where long-term commitments are not for them. And that's just not going to work. It's better to either offer a different deal for them, or through gentle questioning, let them conclude for themselves that your deal is not subject to their worldview because it's an exception. We will strongly defend ideas created by ourselves because they tie into our sense of self, our identity. Most of us would rather die than accept a direct suggestion from someone when it challenges our worldview and therefore our perception of ourselves. We must never try to change the customer. It's pointless, and it's not your job. Your job is to sell to them as they are. Instead, use questions to let them get there themselves. Once they do that, they will actually object to anyone else trying to change that decision. The effect works for you then. Even better if you can get them to an aha realization that they need your product. Then you double down on their commitment to the sale. There's actually brain chemistry involved in a sudden realization of an answer to a problem, a release of dopamine that absolutely seals the deal. Shared puzzles are also extremely bonding, and it's why thriller stories are so popular. We all want to find out who's behind the conspiracy at the end. If you can build a team with your customer where you are both on the same quest to solve a problem, and you're guiding it through using good questions, then you will have a sales relationship made in heaven. So, there you have 10 ways we actually use questions. And now you know there's a bit more to questions than whether they can be answered with a yes or a no. You now have the knowledge to steer sales conversations towards developing relationships and meeting your customers' needs.